Greetings, Raise community. Brent coming in live with today's guest, Tom Wamsley, who serves as Vice Chancellor for Advancement at the University of Illinois at Chicago and Senior Vice President at the University of Illinois Foundation. Welcome, Tom.
Hi, Brent. Thanks for having me.
Tom is, he fessed up right away that he is participating in some hybrid work today, has a child sick at home. And so really appreciate Tom, both, juggling that, but also we were commenting how it's just nice that you can sort of balance those things in a way that in a sort of pre-hybrid work world, we weren't able to. So thanks, Tom, for making that happen.
Oh, no problem. Happy to do it.
Well, Tom, we love hearing about the professional pursuits of our guests for sure, but it's also really fun to better understand your own path to higher education. And so to start, I'd love to say, take me back to junior year of high school. Who was that Tom? Where was he? What was he up to? And what led him to Ohio University in Athens, Ohio?
Oh, yeah. Gosh, that was longer ago than I care to admit. I was at the Catholic High School in Dayton, Ohio. I'm first generation college. My mom went back to college as an adult student. So it was, I remember being a little overwhelmed with the process. It was much simpler at that time. I graduated from high school in 1989. So the Common App wasn't out there and, you only applied to a few schools. And I was looking at several different schools in the state of Ohio. And when I went to Athens and I stepped on campus, and if you've ever been to Athens, Ohio and seen the campus, it looks exactly like what every high school kid thinks college is going to look like, at least back in the late 80s. And so fell in love with the place. Went there, was a political science major. Was an average student, was trying to find my way. After that, I was a political science major with aspirations to go to law school. Took my first constitutional law class and realized I had no interest in law school. And so found my way to working for a professional trade association in Columbus, Ohio, doing some grassroots lobbying and fundraising work for them. And that's where I got, dipped my toe into the fundraising realm. Went from Columbus back to Dayton, worked for a couple local county level elected officials, did campaign, management and fundraising for them. And I just had this knack where I just was one of those folks that just wasn't scared to ask people for donations or their vote. And so, after that, realized that.
Can I just ask, during your time at Ohio U, which I would encourage everybody, if you haven't seen the campus, Google it now. It really is a remarkable place, especially this time of year. And I have been fortunate to get out there. But I have to ask, many of our guests get some exposure to the world of fundraising or alumni and development by way of their student experience, student activity, student calling, et cetera, et cetera. Was your current job in this field we work in on your radar when you graduated, or was it really more that meandering sort of stumble into it?
I think I'm very typical of first generation college, a bit meandering. Didn't really know anything about philanthropy. Again, blue collar family, first generation college, philanthropy was really limited to, our local church and the Catholic schools I went to growing up. And so I had no exposure to it, didn't really know what it was. And again, stumbled upon it through, my ventures into, the public sector and government and politics, and just the power of giving and how it influences so many things in our life that we kind of take for granted.
I am a fellow first gen student, and I think about that all the time, is that, oftentimes we are some of the greatest beneficiaries of philanthropy and the least informed about it, certainly as students. And just, maybe you get a financial aid letter or a scholarship letter and there's a blurb about it, but you're not really processing what that actually means, and certainly not at the scale that it operates, that people are giving millions of dollars. I don't think that maybe even many professionals in the field appreciate how little students would know, especially, in a first gen context, about that part of the world we live in. Yet oftentimes, we've had a lot of first gen students that are now in advancement leadership positions because once you figure it out and once it clicks, it's hard not to get really excited about the impact because we've all lived it.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, as a first gen college student, I think you are, you don't know it at the time, but you're so overwhelmed with the entire experience. You know, what courses to take, what's campus life like, how to pay for college. Many of us, working jobs while going to school. How do you find a job post college? I mean, I think a lot of people were like me at that time, where you graduate and you're looking around saying, where is the job? Didn't really understand, the power of networking, didn't understand the power of alumni networks. And then you start to navigate that, and you find yourself in life where you've settled into a career path, you know what you want, and then you start to reflect, like to your point, how much you did benefit from those people along the way that took the time to talk to you, took the time to guide you. You may not have understood what they were saying or why they were saying it at the time. And that's really, what drew me into higher education, which is, the power of the educational experience is not only the classroom, but it's so much bigger than that, especially for first generation college students. And,
So
yeah.
you were in Dayton, and my understanding is your first advancement role was at the University of Dayton. Is that right?
University of Dayton, their Presidential Society Leadership Giving Club. Yeah.
Remember it like it was yesterday. And
Absolutely.
So if you recall at that moment, how did higher ed fundraising really get on your radar? Like, what prompted you to even apply?
Mm-hmm.
And take me back to maybe the first 3 months, 6 months. Sounds like by way of the political and association work, you would sort of cut your teeth around fundraising. But what was different or familiar as you settled into that role? So how'd you hear about it? What made you apply? And what were some of the early experiences?
Well, I had a transition period between the government and political fundraising and campaign management, and had a 4-year stint in some nonprofit fundraising. So that's where I was really a full-time dedicated fundraiser, doing some major gift work, got my feet wet in annual campaigns, event planning, all those kinds of things. And if anybody's familiar with Dayton, Ohio, I mean, University of Dayton is the big show in town, right? Everybody, the basketball program's iconic in my opinion. The university is a leader in Catholic education nationally, and it's a place where people want to be. And being a Catholic kid and going to Catholic high school, that's where, if you wanted to be a fundraiser, you wanted to be at the University of Dayton. And I still think that that's true. They got a great shop. You've had some former UD employees on your podcast, and they do great work. And so when I went there, it was just trying to figure out how higher education actually works as an institution. I mean, I think that was the biggest thing, because when you're a student, you're just you don't get to peek behind the curtain around the structures, the budgets, the politics, the faculty, all of those things. So trying to figure out how to navigate higher education, understanding the business of higher education. And then the biggest challenge, I think, from a fundraising perspective is that when you, at least in my experience, when I was in front of a donor in politics or a nonprofit, there was a sense of urgency and timeliness, whether it was campaigns or the nature of your work in the nonprofit sector. So when you're in front of a donor, you're pretty confident you were going to get something, right? You didn't know what it was necessarily, but you knew it. In higher education, it's a longer game. It's a cultivation process. The sense of urgency is just different. So that was probably the biggest shock for me, is I was pretty good at getting in front of people just because I had done it, for several years up to that. And then I got in the room and it was like, oh, this is just the beginning of the process. Where in my previous roles, it was a little bit more immediate, a little bit more transactional in nature. So, but I was very fortunate. There was a great team of fundraisers there. I think my first higher education mentor, Fran Evans, who was the vice president of advancement at the time there, who really put that program on the map in many ways, took me under her wing. And, I wasn't there very long before I found myself doing visits with the vice president. And it was nerve-wracking. It was, you knew when you went into a meeting with Fran that she knew what she was doing. She was very, very good. She knew how to make donors feel heard and important, but also knew how to guide a conversation to get to where she ultimately wanted to go with the meeting. So I was very fortunate. I mean, that someone took the time to invest in me like that.
Can I ask, when you think about being in those meetings with Fran at a time when you were really learning the business of higher ed fundraising, like, are there any specific things that you remember her doing that maybe less experienced fundraisers, maybe yourself at the time,
Yeah.
wouldn't have been as confident or as assertive? I mean, what are some of those things where when you think about how Fran did it
Yeah.
relative to how maybe the average fundraiser does it, what could the average fundraiser learn from how Fran either prepared, conducted a meeting, followed up, et cetera?
She was really good at the prep work, right? So on the way to the appointment, I mean, when I got in the car, I had to be prepared, right? She was looking for the briefing for me. I'd never been in that environment before. It wasn't a wing it, but yeah, there was just some general things she wanted to accomplish in the meeting, but not a script. And so, it was free form. And, that was, just didn't know what to expect. When we got in the meeting, she knew the donors very well. She knew the institution very well. And she was very comfortable going with the flow, knowing the unpredictable nature of conversations. And the biggest takeaway from it in one of our debriefs after the call was her ability to be present in the conversation, no matter how many people were in the room, how the conversation might have lingered. She was never thinking beyond the conversation at that very moment. She was in it 100%. And so that was always, if you were to ask her, I don't even know if she'd remember telling me that, but it was like, you have to be present. You can't be thinking about what you want to accomplish in the meeting. The donors have to know you're there for them and you're listening. And that seems very obvious, but now several years later, you see gift officers going in and they're very intent on, many of them, what they want to accomplish with the meeting. What's the next step? How do I move them closer to the ask? And you're not fully present in conversations with donors if you're thinking about those steps. And she was a master at it. I still just remember her being able to get to where she wanted to go in most of those conversations, and then giving herself critical feedback of things she could have done different and better during the conversation. And that was just an invaluable experience I tell people about, obviously, 20 years later.
So you went from the biggest game in town in Dayton to Antioch College, which is one of the smallest colleges.
It did. Yeah.
Oh, that's a big change. And I'm curious kind of what your reflections were on that experience.
Well, I was like most young fundraisers. I was eager for opportunity and promotion. And I followed a good friend there who served as vice president, who was at the University of Dayton and left there as well. And it was a small liberal arts college. I knew enough about it. It's got a pretty storied reputation nationally in liberal arts education. I think it's the birthplace of co-op education, if I'm remembering correctly. And they were in the middle of a campaign. They were struggling financially. And, I got a call from a friend that said, "Hey, I'm trying to put a team together so we can do some good work for this school." And went there, and there was very little infrastructure, very little a strong culture of philanthropy, but a donor population that had concerns about the future of the institution. And so it was a huge learning opportunity because I went from well-established Catholic education, national brand institution to an institution that was really struggling and actually ended up closing its doors for a couple of years to regroup shortly after the completion of that campaign. And so we went into crisis mode fundraising with a donor and alumni population that had concerns about the future of the institution. It was a very different ballgame, but learned a lot about how to relate to donors quickly. We didn't have a lot of time. Clock was ticking to raise money and keep the institution going. How to navigate highly emotional conversations with alumni that were very passionate and cared deeply about the institution and wanted to see it thrive and get back to its heyday. And then that was my first fundraising job where I was really traveling a lot and learning how to manage my time to stay on the road, do donor follow up, and do all those things. So it was a tremendous learning opportunity. Look at it very, very fondly. It was hard. But something I definitely don't regret. I don't know if it was the most effective step in a career path, but I definitely learned a lot from it. So I'm glad I did it.
And then you had an opportunity in Dayton to join Wright State University, very similar size of alumni population as University of Dayton, very different sort of historical origins, mission, kind of career pathing, et cetera. And so I'm sort of curious, when you think about, kind of same geography, same, restaurants in the general vicinity, but sort of very different community. Does that matter, or is sort of the art of fundraising, advancement, and you just have to sort of on the margin modify the approach, or is there fundamentally something different about fundraising at Wright State versus University of Dayton?
Well, in all of the institutions I've worked at, the value proposition for alumni and donors is unique to the institution. The emotional points that motivate donors to get involved and to give is different. And, at Wright State, they are a public institution. Their number one goal at that time was to get students into the universities, to put them on the path of higher education and degree completion. And I took a job as, I believe my title was Director of Development for the College of Business. I don't know if it was Senior Director or not, but and it was really to build a fundraising program for the college. They had a naming donor, some very generous donors for a few years, but they were looking to take their business education model to the next level. A very robust part-time and evening MBA program, which was focused on a lot of folks that were working at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and, trying to complete an MBA for, obviously career promotion opportunities and things like that. And so it was very different. It was very different. It's a non-residential campus. So a lot of commuter students, their time on campus was really defined in their relationships with faculty more so than each other. A Division I sports program, but not something that is packing the house and selling out the arena. Like when I spent time at University of Michigan, and football was such a big thing to bring people together. So it was different. A lot of first generation college as well, and so philanthropy was a relatively new concept. Alums that had accumulated wealth and a passion to give back. But working with them to teach them how they could give back and what the potential impact could be was a fun process. So I was very fortunate enough to be a part of helping close the first $1 million gift from an alumnus during my time there, and that was just a really important part of my work there, is to help establish that culture of philanthropy for the college.
I didn't know this about Wright State, but it's one of the only non-military academy institutions I've seen where the number one employer is a branch of the military. So the U.S. Air Force is the number one employer of Wright State grads. And so what is that connection? You said that there's a base right next door?
Yeah, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And again, it's changed over the years, and I haven't lived in Dayton for a long time, but it is largely a supply chain hub for the Air Force and I think other branches of the military. And it's a lot of defense contractors, civil employees of the Air Force, and they come to Wright State for degree completion, advanced degrees. And so it really is about getting to that next level of salary band and classification in their different professions. That's what draws them to Wright State. And so that's a very transactional form of higher education. So many of the alums and donors we worked with had degrees from other institutions, and Wright State was a relatively young institution as well. It was the state of Ohio, if I'm remembering correctly, started Wright State out of branches of Ohio State, University of Miami, and a small Wright State University, made them all one and made a bigger university. So it's got an interesting history.
And I just need to ask you, I know that while you're at Wright State, you decided to pursue your MBA.
I did, yes.
I'd love to know more about had that been on your radar, or sort of why did the stars align at that time? And are you glad you did it?
Oh, so glad I did it. So, classifying myself as, an average undergraduate student, pursuing an MBA was a chance to truly apply myself to the extent that I wish I would have at different times as an undergrad. The part-time and evening weekend program at Wright State was perfect for me. I was newly married, expecting a first child. So, I did the MBA while my wife was a TV news anchor and expecting a child. So I had evenings free. She was a morning anchor. So she got up at 2:15 in the morning and went to bed at 5 p.m. So my evenings were free. So rather than, sitting around watching TV, I took classes, and I did it over a period of 3 years, and it was great. Learned a lot. I did it for, again, I believe in education, wanted to prove to myself that, I could have done better as an undergrad, if I'm being honest. and really applied myself, learned a lot from it. Met some great classmates in the course of the program, and also was starting to think, being married and becoming a father, thinking about my career and the importance of having an advanced degree for applying for future jobs. And the MBA really worked out well, and I learned a lot from it.
And you then made the move to the University of Michigan, which is where you spent a kind of bulk of your career.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, one, what sort of prompted the move out of Ohio and sort of, to a new area, right? Not too far, but a new area. And then second, you had a couple of, couple years, 3 years finding your way, and then really things appeared to click at Michigan, where you were able to have a 10-year run in a sector where that's very rare. And I'm just curious what the dynamic was at Michigan that enabled you to grow in that manner, and then how you think about applying that same, any lessons learned from that experience now in your leadership position. But let's start with just move to Michigan and set the context.
Well, it was a bit of a controversial decision to move to that school up north when you're from Ohio. And my wife is from Columbus, Ohio, and comes from a long line of Buckeye fans. And
so rarely do you have your family boo when you make a career decision, but maybe there was some booing around Thanksgiving.
There was some booing, and again, my wife was a TV news anchor, so when they announced that she was leaving to follow her husband to Ann Arbor for a career move, that prompted a very interesting emotional outpour from the viewers at the time. They were not happy to see her go, and we're trying to.
Good thing Twitter wasn't as popular at that point.
Exactly. But I was looking to take the next step, and I was of the belief that getting to a bigger program was going to help me develop the skills and experiences that I needed to continue to grow. We were expecting our first child. My wife was thinking about getting out of TV. So it just seemed like if we were going to make a transition, this was the time to do it. I ended up, I don't know, I can't even remember, through a series of interesting events, just getting connected with one of the talent management folks at Michigan, and sent them a resume and applied to be, their director of development for their School of Information, which is their second smallest academic unit on campus. Didn't know much about it at the time, but I knew that Michigan was a place that I'd always quietly been a Michigan fan. For those people that know me, I was never really quiet about it. It was just something I didn't talk about because I didn't like to get booed in public. And I just knew that Michigan's reputation academically and their national brand was a place that was going to be serious about philanthropy, and it was going to be serious about alumni engagement. And there were going to be high expectations. And I just was at a point in my life where I was really ready to kind of take on the 800-pound gorilla. And so it was very fortunate to be hired by the dean at the time, Martha Pollack, who's now the president at Cornell. I got to spend a few months with her before she transitioned into an associate provost role. And, then I was a part of, Jerry May's team at University of Michigan. And it changed my life instantly. I can't even explain it. I was very fortunate. It was a fit from day one for me. I felt at home. I went from, a 7,500 person advancement shop to a 500 person advancement shop. So the first few months were a bit of a blur. I was in awe of the institution. I was in awe of the number of fundraisers, a lot of talented folks there. And I was just committed personally and professionally to making it work. And so dedicated myself to figuring out how Michigan worked, how I could help the School of Information. And I really focused on making the most of the opportunity I had. And I just blindly believed that if I did a good job, it would pay off. And it did. And so, 2.5 years at the School of Information led to director of major gifts position at the Ross School of Business. And then a year later, was, chief advancement officer there. And we were in the middle of a, $400 million campaign. And so it just took off. And I think what enabled me to stay there for 10 years was I loved the place. I loved the challenge. Michigan is, one of their mottos, being leaders invest. And that's a very real part of the culture. And it is a culture of continuous improvement. And I liked that challenge. And again, I was very fortunate to get to spend time with Jerry May. And, when I started at the School of Information 6 weeks later, the dean who hired me said, "Hey, I'm moving into a different role." I had just moved my family. My wife had just quit her job. So it was a stressful time. And, Jerry, thanks to Martha, reached out to Jerry, and Jerry, reached out to some other folks and said, "Hey, we got to support this guy. He's brand new. He's going through a transition, and this is a lot." And I just knew that was something that was a unique opportunity. So I stayed close to Jerry. I can't say that we spent a lot of time together, personally, but I listened when he called. I was there. When the central advancement team called and needed help or needed cooperation or anything like that, I just went out of my way to make sure it happened. And through the course of that, learned a lot, got exposed to a lot of the senior people on the team to see how they worked and how they thought, and how Jerry really ran the business of alumni engagement and philanthropy at Michigan, and just paid attention and listened a lot. And
I feel like Michigan, I just have to ask, just given the scale of the organization, I know there's, between 500 and 1,000 people working in advancement. Yeah. And I feel like in many advancement shops, and definitely some of the ones that, you had worked in previously, you can sort of get by with a bit more of the, walk around the hallways, right? Check in on people, the verbal check-in. That does not work when you're talking about communicating to a 500-person organization. And so I'm actually curious, when you reflect on Jerry's role as a leader, and you being a member of that, broad team and a new member of the team, how does an advancement leader lead and effectively in that context relative to an Antioch college or, something more in the middle of the spectrum?
Well, it's actually even that's a great question. It's actually even more complicated than that, because Michigan's completely decentralized. So I had no reporting responsibilities to Jerry. I solely reported to the deans that I worked for. And, it was, we have our goal. We're a part of a large organization, but we're accountable for raising our own money. We're accountable for recruiting our own students in many ways. And so
boiling it down, when you think about my boss is the dean versus.
Yes. Well, and that was what I focused on. Like I knew who Jerry was. I knew Jerry's reputation. I knew Jerry. I respected Jerry's work and his relationship with the donors. And, when I worked with my deans, it was, Jerry is an asset. This isn't confrontational. It's not us versus them. We were all on the same team. And, Jerry was always very willing to help. And so working with the college leadership to make sure they understood that, in any university, central administration, there's always, ups and downs and different dynamics of the relationship. But I was committed to making sure that we were good partners with Jerry and his team, because I understood what Jerry could bring to the table. He had relationships and a history and a track record of Michigan that, again, he had been there for a number of years himself. That was an asset to us. And so I made an effort to stay connected to him and his team, and keep my team in the Ross School and in the School of Information in lockstep as much as possible with central development, and that paid dividends. I mean, it shows in advance. We always talk about collaboration, and collaboration is this word that some people take a deep breath and roll their eyes about, because it's hard to work with people that have different agendas and different timelines and things like that. But at the end of the day, if you come together and are willing to be transparent and honest about what each person at the table is looking to get out of it, what you have to accomplish, what my dean wants from me, what central advancement is trying to accomplish, and what the president and provost want out of them, you can find common ground. And sometimes there are some competing priorities, and you can talk through those. But if we can partner through those difficult times, we can find a way to get through it. And I think that's one of the things that we were able to do really well during my time at Michigan, which made spending 10 years there pretty easy. It was fun. It flew by. I learned a lot. I got a chance to meet a lot of donors, be involved. And at the Ross School, one of the many interesting things is that the College of Business really was just a key touch point for so many university donors and alumni that didn't give to the business school. So I found myself working with a cross section of the most generous and involved people at the university. And I never asked them for a gift. And that was amazing because I got this perspective of university fundraising that being in a smaller unit that maybe wasn't as central to day-to-day life at Michigan, you didn't necessarily see. So that was really special.
I was just going to ask, we've not had a lot of business school fundraising leaders, and Ross being a top business school, even thinking about the profile of the graduates. We talked about Wright State, #1 employer, the Air Force and that connectivity and the access, first gen dynamic. At Ross, it's a different group, top employers, Amazon, Google, McKinsey. And so I'm just curious, when you think about hitting the road and doing some of the fundraising work with an audience that is, as business savvy as it gets, they negotiate for a living, it's got to be a different dynamic than some of the other missions, right? And contexts you'd operated in. And so I'm just curious how different it felt.
It didn't really feel that different for me. I mean, it seemed pretty logical. I mean, business schools, and especially top 10 business schools, are about rankings and their place in that top 10 and their placement statistics and their student profile, average GMAT scores of the MBA program. So it's actually pretty straightforward. And, you are dealing with very savvy private sector investors and leaders, and they cut right to the chase. So when you get there, you know what questions they're going to ask.
Cultivation is probably a little more direct.
It's much more direct, but equally as emotional. I think that the misconception about business school fundraising is that sometimes it gets categorized or described as transactional, and there's a transactional nature to it, but it's emotional. I mean, there's a lot of pride as to, when you go into a CEO's office, what diploma is in the frame behind his or her desk and the name on it. And they're, C-suite execs, they look at that and they tease each other about the rankings and, with the scores on the football field or the sports field, whatever it is. And there's a tremendous amount of emotion behind that. And, it manifests itself very quickly into a business conversation. But staying in touch with business school donors, keeping them involved in the future direction of the school, giving them opportunities to mentor students, helping them hire and have access to faculty and students. It's all part of the emotional value proposition for the donor, whether they represent a corporation or they're an individual. And it's a lot of fun, and they push you. They challenge the school because they're pushing the school like they push their organizations to be the best they can be. And donors push business school fundraisers because they have high expectations. And that was just an environment that I was very comfortable in, and was very fortunate to find some really great stewardship folks and communication folks and major gift fundraisers that thrived on it. And we were really able to, I think, take that program to another level.
So I want to ask, how do you balance being a good listener and being present with an audience like the business school community that is highly opinionated, that has a bunch of ideas about how you could further improve, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that you as fundraiser ultimately cannot really impact? You might be able to take some of it back to the dean, although I'm sure the dean doesn't want to hear every single question from every single donor. And so how do you sort of balance being a good listener with the expectation setting of, even if you agree with their recommendations, like, you're probably not going to be able to affect that change? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, I think that that's one of the things about, as we talk about career development and training future talent and leaders in advancement, that as an industry we don't talk about enough. We talk a lot about asking for dollars and getting out the door and stewardship and things like that. But how do you handle crucial conversations and telling people no? It's very hard without telling them no, right? Being agreeable without agreeing. That is something I think I had a lot of chance to work on. Whether it was, oh, did I lose you again? No,
Oh,
you're there.
I got you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not sure. You're freezing on my end. Sorry about that. But I found, again, to go back to the being present, being consistently there and being willing and open-minded and confident enough to sit across the table from the folks and allow them to express themselves and altruistically listen, and be honest with them about what you can and cannot do as an institution. While taking that feedback back to the dean and leadership of the school to accurately reflect the concerns and interests of the alumni and the donor population. They need to know. They need to know whether decisions, perceptions are out there, whether people agree with them or not, because we have to manage them. And that doesn't mean we can change everybody's mind, but I have found that people appreciate the ability, the opportunity, if you will, to voice those concerns, to be heard. And I think in all cases, people are reasonable, right? There are some things that you can't do as an institution. And if you can explain why and are willing to sit there and explain why and have that conversation, you gain mutual respect to move the relationship forward. You can move past many of those issues. Now, there are some that are deal breakers for people. And I think any institution in the country, as they see their donor life cycle, and donors ebb and flow in their engagement around leadership transitions or decisions at the school or happenings at a university. And I think the key to making those relationships consistency is being there in advancement staff, being there through those ebbs and flows of the relationship. And that's one thing that I'm extremely proud to have been a part of the Raw School team there, because we as a team were very, very good at especially being there during the tough times.
So you had the opportunity to make the move to the University of Illinois, Chicago, by my count, 6-7 months before the pandemic. What inspired that move? And then, what were you excited about? And then ultimately, what did you learn when you were thrown the ultimate curveball?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if we have enough time to go through all that, but I was looking for my next career step. I had, about 10 years at the University of Michigan. We wrapped up, a $5 billion plus campaign successfully, and was looking for the next step. And UIC came onto my radar because of the high percentage of first generation college students. It's a minority serving and Hispanic serving institution, and an R1 that was in the midpoint of a $750 million campaign. And in the conversations I had, with the then chancellor and Jim Moore, who's the president of the University of Illinois Foundation, it was an opportunity for me to bring what I had learned in a big, shop like Michigan, and try to not bring it in cookie cutter and drop it into UIC, but take what I had learned there, from people like Jerry and the many other great fundraisers and alumni engagement professionals, and create a unique brand of advancement for UIC, for the urban public serving institution. And it was a no-brainer. I got to campus and I walked through campus, and I thought I could make a difference. And met with the faculty, met with the academic leadership, met with senior members of the team, and they were all there for the same reason. They're there. It's a public mission at UIC to serve the city of Chicago. It's about opportunity, access, equity, and those are things that are important to me. And I felt very good that we could establish a program that had a solid foundation and take it to the next level to really help UIC be a national leader in public urban education. It already is, but to be known outside of Chicago. I mean, we are like 95%, of our students come from Illinois. So I just thought there was an opportunity to really grow through advancement, the brand and the reach.
And as a point of reference, I believe over 40%, or it says even in some stats, 50% of the students are first gen, which is remarkable.
Yeah, and of incoming class, freshman class, 70-ish% are Pell Grant eligible. So we have a student population that does and continues to benefit greatly from an educational experience, top 50 public institution, top 100 national institution. If there was ever going to be a place where I could have impact through philanthropy, through building a culture of philanthropy, assembling a team and a model of alumni engagement that could take an institution to the next level, this was just an opportunity that, I was looking for. Was getting my feet wet, was trying to figure out campus. I am married, I have 3 children, getting everybody settled into schools. It was the first move we had made really as a family, because my wife and I moved, when we just had an infant. And then, the world got turned on its ear. And so to say it was a learning experience would be an understatement. It was very, very difficult, balancing the transition at home in uncharted waters in a pandemic. For the parents out there, remote learning wasn't remote learning when you have young children. It was homeschooling, homeschooling on Zoom, which was very challenging, and forever indebted to my wife for her expertise and patience in doing that while I was new in a job. And then trying to build culture and understand an institution on Zoom and build a team. It's tremendously difficult. I think in hindsight, one of the blind spots I had was, I've been traveling and working in the old definition of remote work, doing major gift work for years. So phone calls and emails and Zoom were a pretty natural way for me to engage with people. It wasn't for the majority of my team. It wasn't for the majority of people on campus. That was something that, I think we did a good job, but we could have never anticipated how much people were, we didn't know how long it was going to last, 2 years, but how important that in-person contact was internally. The donors and the alums seem to transition easier than internal audiences. I mean, moving alumni engagements to Zoom, and it actually being in Chicago, where it can take you an hour to drive 15 miles, Zoom was easier for a lot of people. So as we got creative with our alumni outreach and moved to a digital platform, we actually were reaching more alumni than we had with in-person events. So that was a great learning opportunity. And we built a whole infrastructure around that, and, online alumni mentoring. But it was really staff and campus interactions, which are critically as important as donor relationships. And that was hard. Finding ways to bring team members together, build relationships across campus through our 16 degree granting schools and colleges was difficult. And being new, being the guy from that came in from the outside, trying to get us across the finish line of a campaign, and trying to learn the institution and doing that all over Zoom was difficult.
And so how do you balance now spending an hour to go 15 miles
yeah,
versus when it might make sense to just do that quick phone call or Zoom? Yeah. And how do you coach your team on using judgment, balancing efficiency and sort of frictionless engagement relative to the more, nuanced elements that you do get only in person, at least right now?
Right. No, that's what we're all trying to figure out. I mean, I do think hybrid work is here to stay. I think the job market, the labor market is dictating that people have come to enjoy and appreciate the flexibility that hybrid work provides. I think in advancement in particular, we're seeing that, part of the great resignation and then the shift we're seeing in the industry is that people are taking jobs that provide them with more flexibility. So, I'm committed to maintaining a level of flexibility for my team in hybrid work, with a focus on bringing us together individually and as teams on certain days of the week where we can still see each other and be together, while starting to increase the number of events and in-person engagement that we have with alumni. I think the alumni are hungry for it; they're ready for it. But trusting the team, I think that's the biggest challenge any leader has. You have to trust the team and your team members to make good decisions, and have transparent conversations about what's working and what's not. And does a hybrid environment contribute to success. And in some cases, there are some things that you just have to be in person for, and we have to be honest with ourselves and just accept that. Other things, there's more flexibility. And I think trusting trusting my team, my leaders to make those calls, knowing that there are just in any part of life, there are just some non-negotiables. There's some events and some things that we have to do, some meetings we have to be at in person because culture is important. And making sure our teams are connected to the mission of the institution. There's an in-person component of that that's just critical. They have to be on campus. They have to see students. That doesn't mean every day. That doesn't mean 10 to 12 hours a day. And people need flexibility because we can't move backwards around the balance that many of us have come to appreciate around that hybrid work provides.
Yeah, I do think there's been a bit of this sort of ironic shift in the sector that I've heard from some of our guests and just friends in the sector, where it was, pre-pandemic, get out of the office, get on the road, get out of the office, get on the road, and then a little bit of like, get back to the office. Where is everybody? Get back to the office. And it's like, well, you just told us, for a decade plus to not be in the office, and now it's sort of get in the office. Obviously, it's somewhat role specific, and I do think ultimately we need to, start developing a matrix around the trade-offs between scale and in-person experience. And, for example, going to a football game in real life is a lot more fun than trying to, watch it by yourself. There are other experiences. For example, I referenced this before, but I serve on the board of the Brown University Football Association. We used to do our board meetings on Saturdays before football games in Providence, which worked really well for the guys who live in Rhode Island. But for everybody else, it meant you basically had to listen through the phone in the middle of the table, and nobody could hear what anybody was saying. And it was really a horrible experience. And now we've shifted those board meetings to be via Zoom, and it's completely frictionless. We have incredible participation. Guys across generations and geographies can participate. I hope we never go back to saying, well, that's something that we really need to do in person, because it just doesn't make sense. I think there are a lot of donor visits where, as a donor, and I bet those Ross Business School alumni, they don't need somebody to spend $2,000 to fly out and see them, and nights in hotels. Sometimes, sure, maybe, but I would imagine a lot of cases it's, hey, we can do this remotely. Even if there might be a bias towards, well, I want you to be out in front of people in person. And so, even thinking about what maybe the leader might want the team to do versus what do the donors actually want in a post-pandemic environment are things we're going to have to continue to think through.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, and that is, we always talk about donor-centric fundraising. That's got to manifest itself in how we build our teams and how we manage our teams, because the culture we build within our shops has to be reflective of that donor-centric culture, balancing against institutional expectations. And so, that's what I'm trying to find, that sweet spot. That's difficult. I think we're all trying to figure it out. At UIC, we still are largely a commuter campus with a robust, campus experience for students and faculty and staff. But when you're in Chicago, and again, I'm relatively new-ish to Chicagoland, flex scheduling is something that's been here for a long time. So it's not a new concept. We're just looking at the next evolution of it. And there's tremendous value to it. We've been able to, I think, retain some really great staff because we've maintained hybrid work and given them the ability to do that. We've made some recent great hires because we can hire people that can maintain work-life balance and still be at home and help out and still get the work done. And it's not something to be scared of. It's just something that you have to be honest with yourself and monitor and know that you're going to all come together and revisit it more than periodically to see what's working and what's not.
Yeah, I think, look, there are almost every part of the higher education enterprise, for the most part, right? There's online, digital ed, et cetera. But for the most part, it is highly centered around the sort of built environment, the campus and so forth. Yes. And I think, therefore, there's obviously been a hard shift back to in-person experiences for all of the reasons that 4-year residential higher education has, been able to transform lives like yours and mine. But at the same time, that dynamic, those rules, I would argue, don't necessarily apply to two parts of the enterprise: one, advancement, and the other one being enrollment. Your prospective students are not physically on campus. Your alumni are not physically on campus. And so if you're going to have a more flexible orientation towards remote work, it should be in the parts of the business where the constituencies are not centered around the campus experience. And I think in a lot of institutions, it has been sort of a one size fits all, or there's a bias towards, treating everyone, equitably. But I think that there's something just strategically misaligned if you're going to say, yeah, we know none of your alumni for the most part are physically here, but you need to be. And it sounds like you've been able to at least find some balance.
We're trying to find the balance because, I mean, again, just to expand upon your point, but being present and seen in advancement on campus is critically important to make sure that people know we're there, that we're important.
Even if your alumni aren't there, your business partners, your internal constituencies and stakeholders are all present.
Yeah, and they need to see us, and they need to know that we're present. So finding that balance is really important. And I agree with you. I mean, UIC, we've been very, very fortunate to have leadership that understands that we can strike that balance. But even with my own shop, as it relates to hybrid environment, there are some functions that need to be in person more than others, and we do need to create some equity across that. It's not just the major gift officers who have been traveling for years that need to continue to have flexibility in remote work. It's everyone, and trying to find that balance around scheduling is something that we've been very diligent about. I mean, it's not, we're really committed to making sure that all of the functions within advancement are, make sure that they understand that they are valued and feel valued equally. Hybrid work, when you got somebody that's used to being at their desk in the office, if it's processing gifts or answering a phone or what have you, trying to create the same level of flexibility for them is critically important.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your kind of candor as you continue to navigate this in real time. Our time is coming to an end here, but I just have to give you an opportunity to tell me about the current team. Are you hiring?
Yes.
How should folks get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
We are going to be hiring. So, we just wrapped up a successful $750 million campaign, finished about $803 million. We're already in, as no surprise to any of the listeners here, we're already in pre-campaign mode for the next one. Have a very aggressive hiring plan for the next 3 fiscal years that has been conceptually approved, and now we're walking through the funding model. So upwards of 30 or more new employees over the next couple of years.
Wow.
Potentially more than that. That's a modest number. With a mind's eye on having our next campaign goal be over $1 billion. A lot of frontline fundraisers, alumni engagement professionals, talent management professionals. I mean, we're investing heavily in professionalizing advancement and to put ourselves on par with other R1s in terms of staff numbers and our production. The team I've got at UIC is great. We crushed the goal. We had our 3 biggest fundraising years during the pandemic. A lot of people dug deep to make it happen, and can't thank them enough. And really proud of them. Proud to be a part of the group. And they deserve the investment that the foundation and the university and the system is committed to making into our shop. My email and phone number is out there. I love connecting with people in the profession. I think I've established a little bit of a reputation of being pretty candid with people who reach out to me about opportunities and feedback on what they're considering around career moves or how to make themselves more marketable for the next step in their career. And love to have those conversations. Always go out of my way to make time. And but if you're in the market, you're looking to get to Chicago for any number of reasons, you're passionate about public education and a social justice, social equity mission in higher education, I mean, we're someplace that people need to be looking at.
It's an amazing mission, Tom. Thank you for sharing. And I wish you all the absolute best. And it's honestly super exciting to hear such an aggressive growth plan. And I know that it's a lot, right? Growth is exciting, but a whole new set of challenges. And I hope that folks will take Tom up on the opportunity to connect. He's also very active on LinkedIn, so make sure to find Tom there. And I just want to say thank you for sharing your journey with us, Tom.
No, thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
All right, best wishes. And with
Thank
that, Brett signing off with today's guest, Tom Wamsley, who is the Vice Chancellor for Advancement at the University of Illinois at Chicago and Senior Vice President at the University of Illinois Foundation. Take care, everybody.